Enjoy early access to ad-free episodes each week when you subscribe to Wedding Planning Podcast Premium in Apple Podcasts. Enjoy the show. Let's dive in to your wonderful wedding questions. To get started, a handful of you wrote in with questions about wedding planning timelines and where to get a guide for what to do first and the time frame that you should be moving through your plans. To touch on a couple of those specific questions, one, what's an ideal timeline to plan a wedding? Love the show. Thank you. Thank you. So your ideal timeline, as with most everything in wedding planning, will vary from person to person, depending on your specific needs and wants, the length of your engagement. For me personally, 1 year is an ideal timeline. And let me tell you why. In my experience, when you plan a wedding for more than a year, there tends to be a certain point where you just reach a phase of exhaustion and being over it, for lack of better words. So when you're planning for 15 months, 18 months, you just reach this point of saturation and wishing that the wedding was just here already. I'm sick of the details. I'm sick of the planning. I know the ultimate goal, of course, is to enjoy your engagement and have this be a fun time and not a stressful time and not a period where you're constantly feeling burned out. And when you plan for more than 12 months, it can just get exhausting. So 1 year to me is the sweet spot. When you're engaged for less than a year, that's totally fine, but you can kind of come up against deadlines and feel a little bit rushed. So an ideal timeline, in my humble opinion, is 1 year. Now, you may be thinking, well, we only have 9 months to plan. Or on the flip side, we're engaged and we're not going to host this wedding for 2 more years. That's totally fine for the longer engagement, and I'm going to touch on that in just a second. For the longer engagement, I would suggest just putting the brakes on and kind of pressing pause on any big decisions until you get closer to that 1 year mark. And for you, if you're planning a shorter engagement and you have less time, again, that's totally fine. You're just going to need to be decisive and get on the ball with getting things rolling as soon as you determine that wedding date. A spin-off question to this that I touched on, where to find a 2-year wedding planning timeline. So like I mentioned, I would use the more standard 1 year timeline and then just wait until you're 1 year into your engagement to start the real planning. There are things that you can do early. So for example, of course, you can choose your wedding date and your venue even. Those two things go hand in hand. For anyone who has listened to the engagement starter kit, you know that I'm very adamant about choosing your date and your venue at the same time so that you don't run into compatibility issues there. You can also get working on your guest list, but then there are other wedding planning elements that I think it's just better to wait until you get right to that 12-month mark. So for the 2-year wedding planning timeline, do your best. I know it's really, really hard to be patient with all the excitement. Do your best and sit tight for the first year. Look around, get inspiration, browse Pinterest, make boards of all of your ideas, and just try to resist the urge to commit to any big decisions. And at the 1 year mark, you can really dive into setting all the details in motion. Last point to wrap up here, when you make decisions that are more than 1 year out, say 2 years out, decisions about colors or themes or catering and food and drinks, or even committing to large budget items like a photographer, 24 months is just a really long time, and that's plenty of time for things to change, like your personal tastes, your financial situation. There's just a lot of variables. So sit tight, 1 year. Switching gears, let's talk about some of your questions involving family. First of all, what are some ways to involve our family in the planning process? Including your loved ones in the wedding plans is really fun. It can also get a little bit stressful and overwhelming when everyone is coming at you at the same time and raising their hand and begging you to give them things to help with. So I completely understand how that process can snowball really, really quickly. First of all, let's get organized. So I would recommend making a really thoughtful list. Sit down and put some thought into everything that you need or would like to have help with. And the sky is the limit here. This doesn't just need to be help with craft projects or help with making things. This could be help with vendor research. It could be sending people onto Pinterest to gather ideas for something really, really specific. So depending on your style and your personality traits, you might want a lot of help, and you might also prefer that you do most of the work and your family kind of keeps their hands off, and that's fine too. So after you have this list of everything that you would need or like to have help with, then go ahead and schedule a meeting with your family. So whether this happens on a FaceTime call or in person, if you're all in the same area, get everyone together and then talk with them about your list of things that you need help with, and kind of have this open-ended conversation about who can do what or who is best suited to do what, and then make a list of what everyone is willing to help with and willing to take responsibility for in the next coming months. And then make it a point to check in with everyone. Don't let 6 months run away before you check in with your aunt on, hey, did you ever research cake options? And now you're kind of getting to the end of things and running out of time. So put it on your calendar and make sure they put it on their calendars as well, that you have some dedicated check-ins over the coming months just to say, hey, where do things stand with XYZ? And then as time goes on, maybe you need to make adjustments. Maybe you need to take something off someone's plate and give it to someone else to handle. You can kind of have your finger on the pulse of all of that, so you're really on top of everything that's going on. I hope that's really, really helpful. And again, I think including your family is a really meaningful and fun way to go about the plans. It's fun not only for you, it's also really fun for them. Your loved ones really want to help you out, so definitely use their enthusiasm and willingness to help to your advantage. It will take a ton of stress off your shoulders over the coming months. Moving on to next question on family, how to make a shy 17-year-old bridesmaid cousin feel included with the mid-20-somethings girls. Great question. I would start by just being really sensitive to her personality. You mentioned that she's shy, and she probably just doesn't feel comfortable being 8 to 10 years younger than everybody else. In your 20s or in your 30s, that kind of age difference is really not that big of a deal. But when you're still a teenager, that can be really intimidating. So while she might not be able to join you at the bar for your bachelorette party, there are lots of planning activities that all of you can get together and do as a group. You could make it a point to organize some wedding project nights together where you can all hang out at home in a very relaxed setting. I also love making a day of going to a bridal show where everybody can go out to brunch or lunch together and then roam around getting ideas from the various booths. You get a ton of freebies. It's really a fun day. And speaking of bridal shows, this is the perfect lead-in to another really great question, which is, are bridal expos worth it? I'm trying to decide if I should go to one. Based on that last question, you can probably guess what my answer is. Yes, yes, and yes. I really like bridal shows for a variety of different reasons. First off, going to a bridal show is like walking through Google in person. It's like having virtual reality glasses on as you search for wedding stuff on the internet. It's also, another metaphor would be like you can go and speed date potential vendors. I personally have never speed dated. I don't know if you have or not, but that metaphor of just being able to be face to face with someone and make a snap judgment within just a few seconds of, yes, I totally click with this person. I really like their vibe, or no thanks, next. A bridal show is a really great opportunity to get to know multiple local vendors face to face. And like I mentioned, you're going to get an immediate feel for their personality. You're going to also get instant access to information like pricing, detailed information about their packages that they offer, any special deals or accommodations that they're willing to make. And you can ask them just on the spot for creative solutions to any questions you might have specific to your catering plan or the venue that you envision. I've been involved with a number of bridal shows, and in my experience, it's just been a really, really fun way to get to know people. Everyone, vendor-wise, is there on their best and displaying the best that they have to offer. They have invested a lot of time and a lot of money to be there, and they want to get to know you. They want to hear your questions, and they want to attract new clients. So you can use that excitement on their end to your benefit in, again, meeting a bunch of different people. It's a pretty low time commitment, a couple of hours out of your Saturday or your Sunday. And last bonus, the price point to attend these fairs is typically pretty low. So we're talking anywhere from less than $10 up to maybe $25 on the very high end. And even that higher end price being totally worth it for a really, really well-run show. Do some research in your area and see what's available over the coming months. I could do an entire episode on maximizing your visit to a bridal show. So let me know if you're interested in that, and I can put it on the future show topics list. Next question, how do we choose a color scheme and theme? I can share that we landed on our wedding theme by complete accident. In a nutshell, some couples will never actually choose an explicit theme for the wedding, and that's totally fine. Meanwhile, other couples have very, very specific visions, like a rustic winery theme, Beauty and the Beast theme, Disney themes are popular in some parts, a beach or a coastal theme, etc. If you're feeling on the fence or feeling at a total loss for ideas, I would backburner that and just continue to explore in general and take note of what you're drawn to along the way. So in many cases, your wedding theme and even your colors might happen without any deliberate commitments or actions by you. It just kind of unfolds naturally as you start to come into what you like, what you dislike, and as you start making other satellite wedding decisions, such as your venue, which is a really big one on influencing theme and or colors. Okay, picking up where we left off, let's jump into some of your great questions about choosing various vendors. First one is how to pick a DJ. No idea where to start. Going back to our conversation from earlier before the break, a bridal show would be the perfect starting point. DJs love to rent out booths at these things, and you should have a great pool of DJs to talk to at a mid to larger scale bridal show. And bonus, they're really super loud with their music, so they're very easy to find as you're walking through the aisles. I would look for the three following things. I'd look for experience, value, and face-to-face connection. So those things are pretty vague. Let's break it down and get a little more specific. Experience is our first point, and by that I mean just how many weddings have they done in the past, how established are they, and more importantly, what sorts of past client reviews and feedback can they share with you or can you find online and on their social media pages? Wedding vendors typically have a very strong, very important to their business presence online and on sites like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, just to name a couple. So you should be able to easily find input and feedback from past clients and get a really clear picture of whether or not this is someone who has been loved by the people who they have done weddings for in the past. So that's very, very important. By experience, I don't just mean that you're looking for a set number of weddings. I mean that people's experience with them has overall been really, really positive. Second thing to look for in a DJ, and by the way, side note, these three things that I'm going over right now they don't just apply to DJs. They could apply to any wedding vendor that you're interviewing and thinking of hiring. So back to our second point, value. Collect information from 3 to 5 various DJs or DJ companies, and then compare what's being offered for the price. Like most any other wedding vendor out there, the DJ space is really, really competitive. And with the right amounts of patience and willingness to firmly but politely push back, you should be able to broker a deal that works in your favor. Don't be afraid to ask if they can throw in some extras. Can you throw in that custom dance floor? Can you throw in some complimentary uplighting? Can you throw in an extra hour? It certainly never, ever hurts to ask. And if they know that you're shopping around for services, the chance of them giving into your requests for some extra freebies is pretty high, to be honest. So definitely don't be shy. Don't be afraid to ask for those extras. And then last point, and this to me is most important. What is your initial impression of this DJ as you talk face to face? So you are right in front of them, say at a bridal show, or even if you're meeting on site at their office or their office spaces, wherever it is, meet face to face and take note. What's their vibe? What's their energy like? Your DJ is a really big deal because that vendor, they're going to have more direct interaction with your guests than any other vendor at your wedding. So it's critical that you're really drawn to their personality, their overall demeanor, and their energy. And with that, let's move into some questions about the actual ceremony. First question, when does the first dance take place? Right after the couple is introduced at the reception? There are infinity number of ways to place the first dance within that wedding reception. And I have probably seen it all. I've seen the couple launch into their first dance literally as soon as they're announced and they walk into the reception space. And then I've seen that first dance placed at any other variety of times throughout the wedding reception. In my opinion, there's absolutely no right or wrong way to do that. Whatever you feel like plays into the overall flow of the reception best, by all means, do whatever is comfortable to you. All right, last question for today. Any ideas for a unity ceremony? Yes, I shared a handful of really creative, really outside the box unity ceremony ideas just a couple weeks ago on Instagram stories, and I reposted those for you at weddingplanningpodcast.co/unity. So if you're looking for a creative new spin on the old candle lighting ceremony or the sand ceremony, I have some really, really creative ideas that I collected. Again, take advantage of those at weddingplanningpodcast.co/unity. One listener would love to refocus the whole reason why they're getting married. It feels like we forget why. That happens in the overwhelm and the stress of wedding planning all the time. Totally understandable. Another one is how to deal with wedding anxiety leading up to the big day. We all feel some form of anxiety leading up to the wedding, whether it's over finances or relationships with our family and friends. Maybe it's even your relationship with your fiance. There is so much going on during this time in your life, and it is completely understandable that you feel overwhelmed. That's kind of the word of the section for these 3 questions. It's completely normal to be feeling this way. And then one more note that completely encapsulates all of these feelings. How do I know what my dream wedding is? I've never really imagined the details. I only know I want it to be fun with good food. Simple enough, right? I'll keep reading. The problem is that means so many things. I have a different idea and a different theme every other day. I have less than a year to plan this thing. I'm still looking for venues. Then there's the cost of everything and family complications. It just takes the fun out of it all. What do I do? How do I force my mind to imagine my dream wedding with my limited budget? Is there even a point? A humongous thank you to everyone who opened up and reached out sharing those feelings. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to share them. I know these are really, really personal things. I always keep it anonymous, but thank you again for opening up and reaching out in the first place. That really means a lot to me. And again, I know it means a lot to someone else listening who maybe feels the same way and just doesn't have an outlet or somebody to express that to or talk with. Think to yourself, in 10 or 15 or 20 years after your wedding day, no one is going to remember the things that you put a ton of energy into or the things that you left out and you omitted from the wedding day. You will always be your own worst critic. And quite frankly, no one else is paying that much attention to the little things that you are losing sleep over. Believe me, I know that your wedding is a huge deal, and I am your biggest cheerleader in making this one of the best days of your life. But don't sweat the small stuff. Brush it off, sweep it away. Don't give it another worry. Don't give it a second thought. And the second lesson I have to share with you is to focus on the positive, not the negative. Focus on the fact that you're getting married to your best friend and not on the fact that your budget is too small and you can't afford X, Y, and Z. You're worried about being judged for what you did or what you didn't do. Carry this with you as you agonize over all of these little things that can quickly turn into just a big ball of worry and anxiety. I can promise you this. All any of your guests are going to notice or remember or care about is you in love on the happiest day of your life, getting married to your perfect partner, and all the love that everyone is there to celebrate. That is why you're getting married, and that should be the centerpiece of your wedding planning. And anytime you stray away, and anytime it feels overwhelming, and anytime you feel pressing anxiety, just take a deep breath and remember why you're planning this wedding in the first place. No one will remember what you do, and no one will remember what you don't do. Okay, lesson of the day is done. And let's jump into some more of your wonderful questions. Next question, which would be more cost effective, cupcakes or sheet cake? Great question. And my answer is that it depends. If you are recruiting your family and your friends to help you make this happen on your own, so if you're doing it yourself, then cupcakes would probably be easier and comparable in price, But if you're going with a professional bakery, my inclination is to say that sheet cake would probably be less expensive than cupcakes. Now, of course, you'll want to research and check out pricing in your local area. It can vary tremendously depending on where you're located and exactly what you're looking for. Hand in hand with this question, I have a quick tip on sheet cakes in general. If you are wanting to have the fancy traditional wedding cake, keep that fancy tiered cake small and then order additional sheet cakes so that you have enough for all of your guests to eat. Those sheet cakes sit in the back and they are cut and served by the wait staff, and then the pretty cake is out for everyone to see and look at. Of course, you can eat that as well, but the point is that you keep it small to keep costs down, and then you supplement that with much more affordable sheet cake. So that's just a quick money-saving tip on cake in general. Next question, decor ideas for long banquet tables with food served family style that won't crowd the table. This is a wonderful question, and I love it because the answer summarizes my feelings about so many things in wedding planning. And my answer is keep the decorations really, really minimal and really simple. And that's if you put any decorations out at all. Nothing is worse than a crowded table, especially if you're seated banquet style and the food is in big platters in the middle that then 8 to 10 people are all coming in at from all different angles and directions. It's easy to see how that can get crowded really, really quickly. So if anything, I would stick to low things that are low. So maybe a low runner or a low, really simple garland. Once we have plates and charger plates and utensils and salt and pepper and creamer and glasses and water glasses and pitchers and wine bottles and platters of food, things fill up really, really quickly. So if you can do a test run of how that setup is going to look, again, keep it very minimal, keep it very simple, maybe a low runner. I don't think you're going to need a lot though. I think you'll see that that's filled up really, really quickly. Next question is about the guest list. One of my friends is getting married and said she's including some of her vendors, such as her photographer, in her head count for catering because they're there all day. Is this standard/expected? It seems ridiculous to be paying for their meal too after shoveling out thousands of dollars already for hiring them. Okay, let me take this piece by piece. Yes, it is standard. Is it expected? Kind of, depending on the vendor. I personally wouldn't show up to a job and expect to be fed, but across the board, I do think it is standard and expected. Now, with that said, I agree with the sentiment of this question. I also think it's a little bit crazy that after spending thousands upon thousands of dollars to hire someone, you would also have to spend another $150 to feed them. Again, would I ever show up to a job and expect that my employer would feed me? No, I would not. All right, we are back and I have so many more questions to share with you. Before I share the questions, I'm going to share 2 events that you shared on Instagram. First one, it is so hard to stay within budget when I want my wedding to be an Instagrammable sensation. I want neon signs, flower and greenery walls, a mobile bar, but I'm trying to remain realistic. Maybe we can get one of those things and try to come in under budget on others. Yes to all of those things. It is so hard to stay within a reasonable budget when all we see out there are crazy, over the top, ultra luxurious weddings that would in reality cost 6 figures or more to actually host. I certainly hope that our weekly conversations are helping you stay realistic and stay grounded in the reality that what you always see out there on Instagram and websites and blogs and magazines, it's not always reality. And I'm going to touch on that in this next vent, which ties in perfectly. My vent is how 99% of the gorgeous weddings I see on Pinterest aren't even real weddings. They're styled shoots that give me an unrealistic idea of what a wedding should look like. It's true. These weddings, well, I use air quotes around weddings. They're not real weddings all the time. Sometimes it's a group of vendors who have all pooled together. There's a photographer, a stylist, a bride who's an actress, a groom who's an actor, a wedding dress that's given by a vendor, and they all team up and they put on a styled shoot, is what it's called. And to you, the engaged person who's browsing social media or looking on the internet, it looks like everybody has spent tens and tens of thousands of dollars to host these amazing weddings, when in reality, it's not always even a real wedding. So keep your eyes open to that and understand that for most of us, it is much more scaled down and much simpler than those elaborate over-the-top photos and images that you're seeing as you're out there, again, browsing the internet, on social media, thumbing through magazines, etc. Next note is I saw your message about where people cut corners on costs and it came back to bite them. So this one is a question about a potential cost saver. I'm looking for a fairly simple wedding dress with clean lines and a flowy chiffon skirt. I'm considering a bridesmaid's dress that comes in white, figuring with a lace belt and a veil, it will be more or less what I'm looking for. Do you know of anybody who's gone with a bridesmaid's dress for a wedding gown? Are there downsides that I'm not seeing when I'm browsing Pinterest? And my response, I love this idea. I love getting creative and thinking outside the wedding box, so to speak. This is a fantastic way to cut a really big expense versus buying a technical wedding dress from a wedding retailer. I see zero downsides to going this way, given that you have tried the dress on in person and that you love it. You feel beautiful in it, and that's really all that matters. Buying a non-wedding dress, whether it's a bridesmaid style or any other dress that you find out there, this is a wonderful idea. And it also perfectly illustrates that you can use a ton of non-wedding services, vendors, items, etc. for the wedding and save yourself a ton of money in the process. Next up, how long after our engagement should an engagement party take place? We've been engaged for a month and didn't even think about having a party. Well, my friend, the time is now. Any time is a good time to have an engagement party. I love parties and celebrations of all kinds, and celebrating your engagement with your friends and your family is the perfect way to announce and get everyone really excited about the upcoming wedding. I would keep it casual. I would keep it very simple. You can, if you're prepared to, it's fun to announce your wedding party members at this gathering. You can also share the story of your engagement in detail for anyone who hasn't heard it. If you have your wedding website ready, that's also a really fun thing to share at the party. So to answer your question, anytime is a good time for an engagement party. Okay, shifting gears, we're going to talk briefly about kids at the wedding. Whether or not you invite children to your wedding is a very personal decision that depends on a lot of variables. Mainly depends on whether or not you want to have kids there. If you don't, then that's totally fine. I opted not to have children at our wedding. Well, I shouldn't say I opted. We opted. It was a joint decision. In my case, and in John's case, we did not have a lot of little nieces and nephews or young cousins. Our friend group really had not started having children yet. So we asked that there be no children at our wedding. And side note, let me say as well, our venue had a humongous swimming pool that was literally in the center of it with no fencing or gating around it. So that just plain old would have been a safety hazard. Now, you might be listening and thinking, well, I have 15 nieces and nephews and tiny little cousins, and every single one of my close friends has at least one kid. So you're in a different situation where there are lots of little children in your family. So we have lots of questions on the topic of kids at the wedding. I'm going to summarize. One spin on this question is we want some kids to come, but not others. So for example, I'm going to read from the note. I honestly don't mind if my sister and cousins bring their little ones. And since some people are traveling from far away to come to the wedding, it's almost like a family reunion. And I don't really mind those children being in attendance. Coming from a budget conscious place, there are some family friends and friends that I really don't need their children in attendance. So I'd rather not spend the money on these child guests who I'm not really close with. So how do you communicate to the majority of the guests that kids are not invited while still saying that it's okay for your closest family and or friends to have their kids come? Is it then weird for those people when they see kids at the wedding, but theirs were not invited? Okay, this is a tricky topic. Let's start with, this is your wedding. This is your party. You get to invite whoever you want to it. I don't blame you for not wanting every single guest to haul along 2 or 3 children to the wedding. I mean, in some circles, you could end up with as many children as you have adults. I know lots of times when my friends and I get together, we look around and we are literally outnumbered by children, which is kind of a strange feeling. So I understand this point. Unfortunately, the answer is that the chances of someone coming to your wedding who has invested money in childcare or gone out of their way to make arrangements to have someone else watch their children while they go to the wedding, there is likely going to be someone or someones who see that there are other kids at the wedding, and the immediate response is going to be, well, that's not fair. I thought kids were not invited to the wedding. So rather than trying to mask the real situation, in other words, rather than telling some guests, oh, we're not having children attend, but then telling other guests, yes, your kids can come. Instead of that, we just need to make it clear that only the adults are being invited in certain scenarios and children are also being invited in other scenarios. Are there going to be hurt feelings or people who think it's not fair and are going to be upset? It is a possibility. Again, I would just try to be very forthcoming and very upfront about the fact that you have limited venue capacity. You have certain people whose children are a very close part of your lives and they have been invited, and you have others who are not and they have not been invited. It's a tricky situation. So proceed with candid communication, proceed by being honest and straightforward, and this might result in some uncomfortable conversations, but that's kind of the risk that comes along with doing a split policy where some kids can come and some kids can't. The next question regarding children: do babies and toddlers under 5 count towards our guest count? You'll want to run that by your venue and or your caterer. That's going to depend. I'm not sure what the policy is for your specific vendors. Every vendor is going to have a different policy on that. Some venues and or caterers will have a separate child's pricing or children menu so that you're not paying the full price for an adult meal. But again, that varies greatly. So you'll want to check in with your venue and with your caterer. Okay, our next topic for today is an unfortunate family situation that has caused hurt feelings and confusion. I'm not going to read it word for word. I'll just summarize the situation, which is that there's an uncle who does not believe in living together before marriage, and he has come outright and said he feels that that's a sin. And the couple is obviously, understandably, very hurt. They are split on whether or not they want this uncle to be included in the engagement party given his hurtful words. I have an extremely similar situation with my own aunt and uncle. My fiance and I also lived together before we were married, and that was against my aunt and uncle's beliefs. It was also against a lot of our other family's beliefs. It was only the aunt and uncle who actually came out and directly said something about it. Were our feelings hurt? Yes, but no. I've learned along the way, and some of this is hindsight because at the time it was frustrating and upsetting. I have learned over the years, that was many, 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 many years ago. I've learned since then that I cannot change someone else's beliefs, especially if they are rooted as solidly as a religious belief that's been held for an entire lifetime. I cannot change the fact that someone else does not agree with what I believe in. So basically, live and let live. Unfortunately, your uncle does not share the same perspective. He did not have the inner strength and composure to understand that his beliefs are his and your beliefs are yours. And I'm sorry that you're put in this situation. It's really crummy and it's unfortunate and it's uncomfortable and it's stirring up a really hard situation for you. Accept the fact that he disagrees with what you're doing. That's fine. It is what it is. You cannot control his actions. If he wants to be a part of the celebrating going forward, I think that's fine. I would encourage you to talk with your fiance and have a conversation about where you land on it, which is I know that you want to have your uncle be a part of things despite his hurtful words. And maybe he is going to step away and just excuse himself from the celebration entirely. If it's that bad to where he does not want to celebrate with you, again, my heart goes out to you. I'm sorry that this is happening. It's a really, really unfortunate situation. But again, you can only control you. You cannot control your uncle's feelings. You cannot control your other family or your friends. You can control your own life and your own decision and your own beliefs. And unfortunately, that's as far as we can go. Try to let it go as best you can after you've had a conversation with your fiance and you've had a conversation with your uncle. And I hope that the result of that conversation, both of them, is positive and that everyone can move forward and embrace the fact that we have different beliefs and that is normal. And that has been the case since the beginning of time. Okay, and we're near the end. I have 2 more questions to wrap up for today. Quickly, what are your thoughts on assigned seats for the ceremony? Oh my gosh, as if creating a seating chart for your reception is not enough work. Imagine doubling that and doing that for the ceremony as well. My immediate reaction to this question is definitely not necessary to assign seats for the ceremony. If you feel like your specific situation or setup requires or warrants that, then by all means, I'm not telling you not to do it, but I definitely do not think it's necessary to have people in specific assigned seats for the ceremony. And final question for today, is it bad to have a bridal shower or registry if you're having a destination wedding? I don't think it's bad at all. You would typically include your registry information on your wedding website and inside your wedding invitations. So with a destination wedding, you'll probably be sending fewer invites, but my guess is that there will still be people who want to send you a gift. They can get your registry information from word of mouth, or you can share your wedding website with them so that they have that information. And it's totally fine to have a bridal shower and to put your registry information on those bridal shower invitations as well. I always like to remind you that most people really truly want to get you a gift that you want and that you need. So don't be shy about sharing your registry information freely with your guests. What a show. We covered a lot. Thank you so much again for everyone who was in touch with your questions. Thank you for spending this time with me here today, and my best wishes for continued happy planning. I'll talk to you again next week.